Yo, what's cracking, guys? Faison here, and today I'm bringing you guys part two in my three-part How to Navigate Master Duel Season 4 series. The title's a work in progress, I assure you, but yeah, today we're going to be talking about what are the best and worst decks to climb ranked with, so the ranked tier list. So keep in mind before we go, a couple things. One, this isn't really taking into consideration how much I enjoy or don't enjoy a deck. It also shouldn't really be reflective of how much you enjoy or don't enjoy a deck. Ultimately, pick the deck that you like. It's going to make the game a lot more tolerable, even if it isn't as good on paper. Because a player who has good technical play is always going to beat a player on a tier one deck who has bad technical play over many iterations of the game. Also, a deck being higher or lower than another deck on this tier list doesn't necessarily mean it is better than that deck in a head to head. It's just how I feel that they would function in the broader landscape of ranked against all the other decks. And finally, if you notice from the decks that I have selected, I'm not really concerning myself with like Exodia, Banquet of Millions, any of these like you have to go first or you lose gimmick decks. If that's how you want to play, like feel free. It's just that I personally don't really know how to characterize them because they all kind of just function the same way. You go first. If they don't have the right hand traps, you win. They're very coin flippy, and at some point, you are playing them for speed, not for efficiency, because the games do end by turn two, whether you win or lose. So that's cool, I guess. But yeah, let's go ahead and get right into it. First of all, we have Alubur, so the Despia cards. They just released, and in all honesty, as cool as they are just worse invoked at the moment. I don't think they're quite functional without the branded stuff. I think there are a few cool ways to play Despia with like the Fluffle engine, with the Shadalls, but ultimately this is like middling rogue, even low rogue at the moment. I should say that if y'all have the Despia cards or you pull any, do not disenchant them for essence. These cards are super broken. They just need a little bit of support with the branded cards. So if you can hold on to them for a few months, they will eventually be very good. Next up, we have my boy Eldlich, the Golden Lord. Obviously, a tier 1 deck, has been since the start of Master Duel, will continue to be until we get a ban list. And as much as I love Eldlich, it is my go to deck in the TCG as well. This deck is way too strong in Master Duel. It's not even fun because you just sit on your billion floodgates. I feel like we do need to see this get hit in some way, so hopefully Konami addresses this. Next up, we have Invoked. Invoked Dogmatica has come in and out of tier 1 in the TCG historically many a time. The issue that they have in Master Duel is that Nadir Servant is at 1, making it just a little less consistent. Also, without the DPE engine, in case y'all are not familiar, Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer is a card that will bring this deck back into relevancy, or at least that's how it acted in the TCG. But as it stands, this deck is like, I would say maybe high tier 2. It's not fantastic, but it is playable. Next up, we have like just zombie decks, whether this be like combo zombie decks or Eldritch zombie decks. I think that they are rogue at best, like high rogue. I should mention this is not referencing any grass looks greener deck. I've characterized grass looks greener decks as their own thing because all the grass decks function in a comparable manner, whereas like zombie versus grass zombie are a little different in my opinion. So we'll get into it as we get into it. Next up, we have Dragon Maids. I think Dragon Maid control is like pretty mediocre. You get to end on 2 bounces and an Omni Negate, I believe, like best case scenario, which is cool. But ultimately, if you're playing this, you might as well play Dragon Link. It's just better. Striker Dragon's at 3 as well, I believe. So it's like you have access to really strong lines with that, and it can Buster Lock. So I would say that Dragon Maids are probably like a low tier 2, if not high rogue. Um, then we have Numerons, one of my favorite decks. I do love me a Numeron. Unfortunately, it's rogue. It's gimmicky. It's super fun. Attacking for 8k is awesome. And one of the biggest strengths it has going is you don't actually care about coin toss, and because you can't side, that first game is all that matters. You let your opponent full combo, and then you blow out their board and attack for game in one turn. For that reason, I would say it's high rogue. It's quite strong. It is a little expensive, which is one of its biggest downsides, but ultimately, when you play a going second strategy, you're just hoping that your opponent isn't playing a counter matchup, because if your opponent has, let's say, Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, if they're playing some kind of Lyrilusc deck, you're not going to really be able to out it effectively unless you draw either Godarla or Forbidden Droplet. And either way, you're not feeling too great having to rely on drawing those cards. Next up, we have Lyrilusc. Obviously was a tier 1 last format. It will continue to be a tier 1. And I should note that the order within these tiers is rough at best. I don't know for sure if Eldlich or Lyrilusc is a better deck. I've won about 50, 60, 70% maybe against Lyrilusc players, and against particularly competent Lyrilusc players, I'd say it's about a 50-50. I don't think that one deck is like notably better or worse. But yeah, obviously this deck is very strong. You end on Utopic Draco Future, plus the Ensemble Robin, plus an Apex Avian, plus a Simorg, and I think you can also end on Revolt, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Either way, it sets up a ton of interruptions, and it is just incredibly strong, and it's very cheap, so if you're trying to climb, pick it up. Next we have Blue Eyes. I know this is a fan favorite. I don't think I need to say much. I know there's like people in Platinum 1 playing Blue Eyes still. Great. It's rogue. Like, if you like the deck, play the deck, man. But I don't know how to tell you all this. It's not great. It's fine. Whatever. Next up we have Ignister. I think Ignister is actually a very, very underrated deck, because in a best of 1 format, pre-siding, your opponent doesn't have outs to a 6,000 attack monster that is unaffected by everything. Unless they're main decking kaijus, which, let's be honest, no one is, this deck is incredible. And on top of that, it has crazy going second potential. You just rely on like droplets and stuff like that to break the board, and then you attack with an access code that can attack twice and has 5,300 attack. It's so strong. Yeah, not much else to say about Ignister. I would definitely recommend y'all check this out. I plan to have a profile from my teammate Dusk on the channel soon. I know I've been talking about it for a while, and I've just not gotten around to recording it. But yeah, we got top 4 in like a 900 player tournament, and he played this, and it was incredible all weekend. So make sure you check it out. I would say that this is like a low tier 1.5 deck. Very, very underrated. I think you could make an argument that it's like 2, though. Next up, Adamancipators. I think Adamancipators after Drytron is the best combo deck in the game. I would consider Lyrilusc to be more of a mid-rangey deck. But yeah, this is obviously really, really strong, and I've uploaded a bunch of videos with this deck before, but I should note that with the addition of Baron de Fleur, we've actually increased the ceiling that this deck has even further. The deck was already super strong, now it's only gotten better. Obviously still tier 1. Next up, Dark Magicians. Same issue as Blue Eyes, pretty mid. Yeah, there's not much else to say about this. Maybe it gets a little bit better after Illusion of Chaos releases, making Magician's Souls a little bit more consistent. You know, Konami loves printing Dark Magician support and Blue Eyes support because these are like very classic cards, but unfortunately all of the good Dark Magician cards are good because they're used in decks that are not Dark Magician. I don't know how to break this to you guys, but like, there's a reason Dragoon is good, and there's a reason Magician's Souls is good in the TCG, and it's because you don't have to play Dark Magicians to play them. But yeah, moving on, we have Phantom Knights. So Phantom Knights here, I'm saying more like the Dark Requiem version, nothing Rongo related. I'd say that this is like a tier 2 deck. It just doesn't accomplish that much. It loses really hard to spell and trap cards, so it has a bad matchup into Eldlich, which is a very high representation deck. I would not recommend playing this version of the deck if you are interested in playing Phantom Knights. Next up, we have Sky Striker. I think that this is like a high tier 2, low tier 1.5 deck. I think it is quite decent. It has a strong matchup into Eldlich. You can play a ton of hand traps, making it strong into Drytron. I think that this is a relatively low representation deck, but having 2 engage and losing your second and third Kagari seems like a pretty good trade for the deck because I think it's still quite good. If you guys are looking for an Eldlich counter, this is the one. Next up, we have Live Twins. This is a rogue deck. I think it gets a little bit better after people start playing like Scythe decks. I think maybe people should consider throwing Scythe into Live Twins as is because they can access it pretty consistently from what I understand. Yeah, ultimately, Live Twins are a very cool archetype. They generate a lot of advantage. They have pops. It has all the makings of a good deck, but it's just not one. I don't really know what's wrong with it, but maybe it's just that it has no real win con. Because it does grind, but it doesn't really set up something strong enough to kill, and it fiend locks you, so you can't effectively climb into access code. Yeah, I don't know. This deck, I want it to be better. It's just unfortunately not. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in Rogue. Yeah, Rongo decks, primarily Phantom Knights with Rongo. Easily a low tier 1 deck, very, very good. I'd say that the best 3 decks are like some kind of Tri-Brigade variant, whether it be Zoo or Lyrilusc, Eldlich, and Drytron. But after that, Adamancipator and like Rongo decks are crazy. I would say that maybe Rongo is a little bit worse than Adamancipator, because it loses a little bit harder to Eldlich, whereas Adamancipator, as long as they don't have the right floodgates, you don't lose to Eldlich. But yeah, I don't know. This is a tough one. They could it could be either or. I think you could very easily make an argument that Rongo is like the 4th best deck in the game. Dragon Link. So Dragon Link on paper is actually really, really good. They have access to everything except LP, I believe. You can Buster Lock and everything. It's a very strong deck. But unfortunately, with Max C around and everyone else's ability to play full power Adamancipators, Rongo, Eldlich with a billion floodgates, this deck is just underperforming like crazy. I would say it's like a low tier 1.5 deck still. It's got a lot of potential, and I think it just takes a ban list for this deck to skyrocket into tier 1. Next up, we have Drytron, obviously a very feared deck in the format, arguably the best one in the game. It's literally at 120% power compared to what it ever was in the TCG because they have Ben 10 at 3 and their Mu Beta. There's not much else to say. Deck's broken. Next up, we have Pure Zoodiac. This deck is, in my opinion, terrible. It is unplayably bad. I should really add a tier under Rogue for this deck. It's really, really not good. It is like the bottom of Rogue. Because the issue is, while you do have Trident, that's cool, you can only make 1 Zeus. And realistically, that's all Zoo ever really did. You could play like Zoodiac Eldlich, that was popular for a while in the TCG. But, yeah, it's not fantastic. It doesn't do enough. And Zoodiac Eldlich is like, fine, it grinds, but it's just not going to keep up with the tools that we have access to in the current state of Master Duel. Next up, we have Thunder, like a traditional Thunder deck. I'd say this is pretty decent. A lot of decks want to Surge. It has a good enough Drytron matchup. Yeah, I would say that this is like high tier 1.5. I think that this is like a weirdly low representation deck considering Colossus is so strong and beats like a lot of the top decks except for Adamancipator, and arguably Eldlich, but yeah, unless Eldlich has like a skill drain or something, Colossus is a problem even for that deck. Next up, we have VW. Yeah, VW on paper, fantastic deck. You can go into VFD. It is arguably the best deck in the game currently to go and like just spam out True King of all Calamities with. But ultimately, it runs into an issue that most good decks don't, is that it loses to itself. Really hard, actually. It is a very bricky deck. If you don't draw the right starters, you just lose. So it's great when it works, but it's terrible when it doesn't. And it also can't play through multiple hand traps. But to be fair, in the current state of the game, not a lot of decks can play through multiple hand traps. So I don't know. I would say that this kind of falls into the same line as Dragon Link, where like on paper it's super good, it's at full power basically, and the only thing holding it back is that the other decks are just so much more broken. Um, Next up, we have Lunalights. I believe Tiger's at 3 in this game. And the TCG players are terrified of Tiger coming back to 3. But I hate to break it to you guys. Time Thief Redoer isn't a problem card. No, like, who cares about this? This deck is like low representation, and when it's around, it does basically nothing. I think Lunalight is very, very overrated. I'm sure at a time it was super, super broken. It just doesn't accomplish what it used to, and for that reason, I'm gonna say it's like high rogue. Next up, we have Tri-Brigade. This is referring to like the Pure and Zoodiac variants. Tri-Brigade is obviously very, very good. I'd say it's probably a little bit worse than Lyrilusc, like the Lyrilusc version of Tri-Brigade, but I think you could make an argument either way. I think that Zoodiac Tri-Brigade is really, really good, but it's obviously a tier 1 deck nonetheless. Next up, we have Gren Maju, another deck that I really like. I love these going second blowout decks. They're just a lot of fun in my opinion. Ultimately, this does have the same issue as Numeron, which is when you go second, you're really always playing off the back foot. That being said, a deck that chooses to go second is never disappointed by die roll. So in that regard, I think Gren Maju is quite good, but ultimately it will still be a rogue contender, because if you see those gimmicky OTK decks or like Exodia decks or whatever on ladder, you just hard lose because you don't play that many hand traps in this deck. Next up, we have Spyrals. This is another deck that people are terrified of coming back to power in TCG, but ultimately it's not really that good. I think it's a little bit better than Lunalight. It seems to be able to accomplish more, but like there's a reason that this deck isn't winning anything. It was incredibly powerful for its time, but time in Yu-Gi-Oh is a really big deal because power creep is crazy. So for that reason, I'd say like low tier 2, high rogue is probably appropriate. Next up, we have Dinos. I think Dinos are really, really strong, very underrated deck. You are like Misk is at 3, and that card's insane. I think that people just don't like it because there's access to so many other cards, but I think this is like a low tier 1.5 deck. My buddy Dom was playing this in our 3v3 tournament, and when we got top 4, and he was like tearing it up. I am very, very high on this deck. I think that people just don't like it because 1, it's expensive, and 2, why would you play Dino when you can play Drytron? Grass looks greener. So this is kind of referring to all the grass decks. Grass Thunder, Grass Zombie, Grass Shadal. All of these decks are fucking broken in my opinion. Like they are so, so strong. Something about being able to mill 19 or whatever is really, really dumb. You get to plus so hard off of everything you send to the grave. Like even a deck like Invoked Dolls, which I'd say is tier 2. I was playing against one on ladder. He resolved grass. He got to chain link like 7 from his graveyard and just drew a bunch of cards, summoned a bunch of cards, and I was like, oh my god, I can't play through this because you turned your 5-card hand into like 12 resources with 1 card. How is that even possible? Yeah, grass is insane. Easily tier 1. I just don't know where I'd put it. But yeah, highly recommend y'all try out a 60-card grass pile. The biggest downside to this is they're always expensive. Like it's 60 cards, and there's a bunch of ultra rares in it. Orcust. Harp Horror is at 1. People are terrified of Harp Horror in the TCG. This deck sucks. I hate to break it to you. Ending on the counter trap plus Dingirsu plus IP or whatever their board is, it's not threatening. It's been power crept to all hell. I wouldn't even put this at like high rogue. I would put this at like mid rogue. I think that this deck is very, very overrated. I urge anyone to prove me wrong, roast me in the comments, but like yeah, ultimately I think Orcust is like, it has not stood the test of time, that's for sure. Next up, we have Pend. I think Pend is very underrated. I don't actually know how to play Pend, so I can't say for sure what their lines should look like, but this deck grinds like crazy. I saw someone playing like a 60-card Pendulum list, and it was like totally dumpstering me on Eldlich because I couldn't out the fact that he summoned every turn, in addition to his draw, and like at some point I was running out of resources to send off lords, so that was an issue. Yeah, I think this is like probably a high tier 2, low tier 1.5 deck. It's quite good though. Next up, heroes. This deck sucks. It's very very expensive. I think it was MBT saying like it's his job to play Yu-Gi-Oh, and even he can't justify building his favorite deck because it's so expensive. Yeah, no, this deck sucks. Don't build it. The only good hero, as far as I'm concerned, is Destroyer, Phoenix, Enforcer, and he's not released yet. So yeah, we'll put him in like low rogue along with the other the classic archetypes that ultimately just aren't very good. Finally, we have Salamangreats. I think Salamangreats are all right. People just don't like them because we're in a combo format right now, and Salads just can't keep up. They do have access to a lot of tools in Master Duel, and I think that this deck will become better as the ban lists push us more towards a mid-range format. But as it stands now, I'd say that this is like mid-high rogue. It's like decent. But yeah, I think this is the 30 decks I could think of seeing on ladder. If I missed anything, please feel free to let me know. Let me know if I made any mistakes as far as you're concerned, and leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It lets me know what I'm doing right and wrong around here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.